to Behind the Ballot, where politics meets real life. We break down state and federal issues, showing how policy shapes everyday Americans. Engaged, balanced, and informative. That's our promise. I'm your host, Mikkel Jenkins.
And this is Muhammad Alec.
And today we have just a short episode, but it's going to be very impactful on what we go over. As we know, the Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, and that's going to be having a lot of ripple effects. Some of which we're going to get into, and we've been calling that these tariffs were illegal from the beginning, and that this ruling was something that me and Mohammed both saw coming down the line, and something that sure the Trump administration has definitely prepared for. Sadly, it took months to get here, but
I'm glad we
here
didn't
we
have to
are.
wait for the summer, at least,
No,
honestly.
yeah, I'm glad because that was the scenario as well. Them, kicking it down the line once again when they really were supposed to rule on this a few months ago. Realistically, even before the new year, they were supposed to rule on this. But we'll just get right into it. So, in a pivotal 6-3 ruling on which took place a few hours ago, the U.S. Supreme Court invalidated President Trump's broad tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, also stated as EPA. So this is the 1977 law, which was not intended for sweeping economic policies like the Liberation Day tariffs, which levied a 10% tariff on most U.S. trading partners and high rates on nations such as China, Canada, Mexico, the EU, Japan, and South Korea. So, for the opinions, the majority opinion, the lead Chief Justice John Roberts, and supported by Justices Sotomayor, Keegan, Brown Jackson, Gorsuch, and Coney Barrett, stressed that the EPA tariffs targeted specific foreign threats during national emergencies, where for that there should be certain agency investigations as well as requirement thresholds that need to be met for that national security field to be breached, as well as general trade imbalances would not justify the act's use either. And
And I just want to add,
yeah.
that the whole argument that the tariffs.
Oh, I have lost Muhammad.
Now I'm back. That was
Okay,
weird.
there
I
we
don't
go.
think I've ever had someone like snap out that fast, come back in. But
Yeah, that's weird.
as I was saying before, I got rudely cut off by the server, probably my own Wi-Fi. But the argument that this is largely for trade deficits and to improve or demand better trade deals with our partners is very a poor and false argument, and it's the one that
Yeah,
Trump and a
100%.
lot of his cronies like to use. And I think the best example of this is looking at Brazil, which was literally one of the handful of countries that we had a surplus with, and the biggest surplus that we had was with Brazil. And then we see Trump put up nearly 50-60% tariffs on Brazil, and it wasn't due to an economic trade imbalance. It wasn't due to them being a threat to the mainland United States. It was because they had their own internal domestic trial about trying to throw their former president in jail. So
Yeah.
Trump said, "Oh, well, I don't agree with that, with you guys doing this domestic policy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement 50% tariffs on your country." So like clearly this is just a thing that he was using to strong arm countries to listen to what he wants, even if it had nothing to do with the United States of America.
Yeah, so realistically, not only is his economic policy in a chokehold, but his foreign policy is in a chokehold as well, because he was using that, as Muhammad was saying, in a way, to strong arm a lot of countries to whether back out of deals with China and Russia, regards to oil or things of that nature, or for other resources. But it seems like now he has no teeth after the Supreme Court has
The dentures
stated.
have been pulled out of
Yeah,
the
basically. Yeah, basically, he has no foreign policy besides just trying to negotiate, then getting mad at negotiations, and then just moving completely towards military action, like as we're seeing with Iran currently, and then wanting to get into there's also going to be the unresolved status of about 130 to about 200 billion in collected tariffs,
these
with
refunds
potential
are going to be
refunds.
crazy.
Yeah, potential refunds are exceeding 175 billion amid debates over whether it should go to importers or consumers, depending upon who bore the cost most. And I know we have repeatedly said that it's around 1,300 for each American that these Trump tariffs have cost, but new analysis is actually stating it's around 1,700 actually that each American has now paid into these tariffs since the Liberation Day, and I'm sure you're going to have a swarm of um,
And I want to add,
businesses wanting to
the-
sue the government
yeah,
over these this ruling and so forth. And Muhammad, what were you going to say?
I want to say the whole reason why this case was in the Supreme Court was because there was businesses suing the Trump admin saying that it was costing them money and that the government isn't allowed to implement these, the executive branch. So they, what I would, and also these numbers that Mikhail is talking about isn't just things that we're pulling out of thin air. This is actually from the Tax Foundation
Yeah.
about how much Americans have been have been taxed as a result of these tariffs.
Yep.
And then I really do. My belief is that this will probably go towards the companies themselves because it's just easier to
Yeah, it's going to be
calculate the
easier that way.
numbers, a lot easier that way. I mean, we'd
Yeah.
have to have another COVID-esque stimulus check to be able to get that money to all the Americans. And it's like, okay, well, who's buying what? Is that going to be even considered? Instead, it's just going to be absolutely a pure blank to the company's check. And
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how those details will go and
Well, I
how
know
they'll
that
decide
one
against how much
company, I think we have reported that actually Costco is one of the companies that have were starting their litigation
they are.
procedures as in regards to the tariffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all falls out. But yes, it would be a lot easier for it to go to businesses, but ultimately it is going to be the federal courts, the lower courts, that give that authority to businesses to allow them to go after the United States government, which I think they honestly should be able to. I mean, these were illegal tariffs that shouldn't have been implemented to even begin with. This is another way that Trump has continued to expand the executive power and almost try to make Congress useless, because God forbid that the Supreme Court actually agreed with this.
Oh, that's
Then
crazy.
you start to really think, what's the reason of Congress and why do we have all these members here? Why
Yeah,
not just dwindle
literally.
it down even more? Because the president is now consolidating power more and more and more, and then wanting to get into the dissenters of the rulings, who were Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh, who advocated for greater executive leeway.
Which is
Still,
crazy to me,
yeah.
which is
I mean,
crazy.
Kavanaugh kind of led the way and kind of gave a pretty good summary of the various avenues that Trump could go with certain sections of what we're going to get into of the trading with enemies act, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But the decision was celebrated a lot by anti-tariff Republicans and groups like the American Soybean Association for curbing presidential overreach and alleviating burdens on farmers facing retaliatory measures. Historically, EPA has been invoked extensively since its 1977 enactment to replace the broader Trading with Enemies Act, which I had referenced earlier, beginning with President Jimmy Carter in 1979, with sanctions during the Iran hostage crisis, and expanded by subsequent administrations for over 30 ongoing programs targeting entities like Russia and North Korea. However, Trump's novel use of tariffs, as we've seen, has marked a first, upheld in earlier cases like Dames and Moore v. Reagan in 1981 for non-tariff actions, but was struck down here for exceeding statutory limits on importation regulation. U.S. stocks actually also rose sharply following the ruling, which I was kind of surprised with. It rose and then kind of settled back in. I know the Nasdaq was rising, and I know the Dow ticked back
Is the
down.
Nasdaq still above 50,000?
I think the Dow ticked back down to like 49,000, but I'm not sure where it's
Yeah,
at
let me check. That's what I meant.
specifically. But defying the ruling, of course, and not to mention, Trump is not the first to defy
The Dow
ruling.
is no longer over 50,000. Poor
Yeah,
Paylocity.
I did think it went down, but it's interesting to know that it has not rebounded from Trump's potential backup plan and things that he's stated. But as I was getting into, like, a lot of presidents have, of course, not agreed with the Supreme Court rulings. Like, you've had FDR and few of the rulings of the Supreme Court landed on him, and he actually wanted to pack the court, which was an issue that we've talked about, and how when he tried to do that, everyone was pretty much against him and his Green New Deal at that point in time. So it did take a moment for him to get that passed. But President Trump is just, denouncing the justices as disloyal to the Constitution, which is completely against the fact, and also calling them patriotic. And even for some justices, stating that their family should even be disappointed in them for their ruling.
Isn't it
And
ironic how one of the most unconstitutional presidents in modern history is calling other people unconstitutional? It
yeah,
just makes me
basically
laugh so
insane.
much how, like, if you use specific buzzwords, it really just sits well with people. Like
Yeah,
unconstitutional, patriotic, justice, liberty, democracy. Like those five, there's a few more buzzwords that Americans just love to hear. That if you
yeah.
throw them out there, you can make any argument turn into like a emotional argument that has no logic behind it.
And I
And
mean, Neil Gorsuch and Comey Barrett are two justices that Trump got appointed, and they
yeah,
sided with the Constitution. And that's what I think the Americans want. They want, yes, you appoint someone to the bench, to the highest bench in the nation, but they are able to read the Constitution and law as is.
yeah.
That's really what the job of Supreme Court justice is for, is to interpret the Constitution and how they
Ooh,
see fit, not as a, oh, that's nice, not as emotion, as to how certain things are supposed to be prescribed in certain cases, but really more so how is their viewing of the Constitution, whether it's a fluid version of the Constitution that changes with the time, or is it a more restrictive and traditional view of the Constitution, where the Constitution is the current foundation and doesn't change, and is just the times that have to bear with it. And then, as I was saying, he was defying the ruling and now denouncing the justices as disloyal to the Constitution and unpatriotic, and even pledging even stronger approaches, promptly announcing a new 10% global tariff under Section 2122 of the 1974 Trade Act, a provision allowing up to 15% tariffs on deficient running countries for a maximum of 150 days without congressional extension. So, even though it's 150 days without congressional extension, after those 150 days are over, Congress will have to vote on those measures. So that will most likely bowling ball it to Labor Day, a few weeks, months before the midterm elections happen. So I was actually seeing this as a saving grace, that yes, the tariffs are now done for the GOP, and they can actually talk about how the tariffs were almost bad in a certain light. But Trump's going to be wanting to push this full train, and is going to want to have them vote on this way before his 150 days are over.
yeah,
And this specific law has never been used by any president since its passage, despite discussions as a temporary fix for balance of payment issues. And from economic analysis, including those from the Tax Foundation and Yale's Budget Lab, highlight the original tariffs mixed effects, such as inflating consumer prices by, as what me and Muhammad were saying, 1,700 per household in 2025, while benefiting sectors like steel, but harming agricultural through global retaliation, with markets showing a lot of volatility amid refund uncertainties. Because we were saying whether it's going to go to consumers or whether it's going to go to the actual businesses themselves. And this would put it up to Congress. And as I was saying, GOP is going to have to vote on this. So they're going to have to either stand on this or run from this as the midterms start to heat up.
and I remember one thing that I was, one common opinion that you really hear from people who do support Trump's tariffs is that it's meant to boost up American production, manufacturing, and things like that.
Yeah.
And across Trump's second term, there has been like a very small uptick in manufacturing in America. And I
Yeah.
just want
Very.
like to give like a good example, in my opinion. If you're somebody, let's just say you make burgers, and you have somebody who you buy your ground beef from, and you can get it, like, let's just throw out an example, $5 a pound, but his beef comes not from America, And then there is American beef, which comes in at $20 a pound. You know, not these our numbers aren't exact and correct; they're just for example purposes. And then the U.S. government says, well, because of we want more people to buy American, we're going to now make that $5 ground beef cost $25, so the American version is cheaper. So at that point, it's like, well, yeah, I'm going to buy American now because it's the cheapest, but now my overhead is much more expensive than it was before.
Yeah.
We've seen that with steel. We've seen that with multiple items, and we're going to see it. We have seen it quite a bit, literally across the board. And I am excited to see what the supposed free market conservatives are going to do. Because I also want to add, Trump struck down NAFTA, which was quite literally the North
Yeah.
American Free Trade Agreement. And you can say, oh, well, you can't rely on a law's name for what it
Well, even
actually
his
does.
agreement that he put together, the United States-Mexico trade agreement, he even shot that down as well. So it's not even like he's even agreeing to policies that he even put in place
He himself put in
himself. You know
place.
what I mean? So it's
He
like,
put in Jerome Powell in power, and now he's trying to get Jerome Powell out. I mean, like this
exactly.
guy just goes back and forth on his own damn
Now
ideas.
with these justices as well, it's anyone that doesn't agree with him, it seems like he has a way to biting back at them in some level and or form as well. But
It's
I mean,
interesting.
yeah,
It's interesting seeing the conservatives who don't have the risk of losing their job, choose to go away from Trump. Whereas the ones who do have that risk, like the representatives, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to stand toe
yeah,
heel. I'm going to follow whatever the president says, no matter what it is, no matter how much I disagree with it." And whereas we've got Jerome Powell going against the guy, basically literally just not making fun of him, but disagreeing with him clearly publicly on national TV. I remember the one, it was when Trump was calling out the Federal Reserve for using billions in
yeah,
renovations. And Powell's like, those
yeah,
finished 7 years ago because we had to rebuild a part of the
yeah. That
building.
was funny. That was
And
funny.
Trump was like, "Oh well, I'm just seeing it for the first time, and I don't like it." And the guy's like, "Well, it's done. It's been done for years. This isn't new. This is not new at all." And then also seeing, I believe it was one of the justices that ruled against the tariff. Oh, I'm blanking on the name. One of the conservative, I believe Gorsuch.
Gorsuch.
Gorsuch essentially said like, "Well, if you guys are really, if the people supporting the idea of the president having these overwhelming powers, I know that a big benefit of the legislation process in America is the fact that it is slow and it also requires people to be pragmatic and discuss and come to a mutual agreement. So if you are against this decision that we are putting out now simply because you are supportive of the president, I know for a fact you will be glad that this decision came about when the president changes to someone who you don't agree with.
Oh,
So this
100%.
isn't something that we
Yep.
can just say, oh, just because we have the power now means we should take as much as we can. This is another representation of just because we have the power means we should be more responsible and
Yes.
abide by the checks and balances within the Constitution.
Yeah,
And
as Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility, and that's
yeah,
exactly what it is, and that leads to a lot of the same arguments that he had regarding the independent agency Supreme Court decision as well. It's very much on those same lines, and who would have known that Gorsuch is out here almost leaning in on his democratic and liberal ideologies and the way when it comes to interpretation of the Supreme Court and actually reining in president executive power and keeping in stone congressional power because at this point as we've been talking as the last 12 months year and 2 months should I say of the Trump presidency, it almost seems like Congress has become deficient in a lot of its duties and its power. So it's glad to see that the Supreme Court is able to uphold this staunch power of Congress. But as a potential backup plan that Trump has, he could turn to Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act, which empowers the U.S. Trade Representative to investigate and counter unfair foreign practices like intellectual property theft via tariffs or negotiations, requiring procedural steps, including investigations and public comments. This section has been employed in over 130 cases since 1974, notably against Japan's semiconductors in the 1980s and EU subsidies, but saw aggressive revival under Trump's first term, actually, with 370 billion in tariffs on Chinese imports, sustained under the Biden administration and largely upheld in courts like the U.S. Court of International Trade, despite procedural challenges, offering a more targeted and resilient alternative to EPA's emergency framework, though it has a limited scope compared to EPA, as it more focuses on unfair practices rather than universal levies. So this means that the Trump administration will have to investigate whether these are unfair practices and whether or not these unfair practices are justified, and from that justification, they can allow for these tariffs to continue on certain countries. So that's going to be the interesting part when these investigations come out, whether, are these practices actually or have been in the disadvantage of the United States? Have they been unfair? The truth is only going to be told from these investigations. That will have to happen for, the revenue from these tariffs to not, disperse to all these consumers, and for basically the economy to go in somewhat of a frenzy after this ruling, and kind of put together some form of guiding hand on what's kind of happening next. Because as we know, the Supreme Court did not give any guidance to reimbursement of these funds, whether to consumers or the manufacturers themselves. So everything is kind of in a gray area, besides the next step that Trump is doing to continue to fortify his tariff approach on his economic and foreign policy as well, which
And
is
I
almost
know
in order.
I know one of the things Kavanaugh said as well. He was like, literally, this would be far too difficult for us to actually pinpoint who should be
I
reimbursed,
mean,
how
yeah, I
much.
don't think it's
But
their job to really do it. And I think it's
I don't think so
honestly,
either.
I think it's the federal court's job to do it. The federal court should be able to delineate and determine who truly should get the funding, who should get the refund. And it could be a two-pronged approach where you have it, yes, it goes to the businesses and one manner, then the businesses can let that levy be, can let that refund also be made to the consumer on their end. Like, hey, we know you made this purchase that was in high cost due to the tariffs. Here is your refund, X, Y, and Z. I feel like that's a more practical way to go about it. But as you know, with the releasing of the funds, who knows? Because we know that the 12 billion that Trump gave to the farmers, it's like, what do you do with that money now? That's already
Yeah.
probably been spent already. It's like, do you now ask for all of that back in a certain manner, or like how do those things proceed, which is what federal courts are going to have to delineate and decide what's the best course of action. And I think we can definitely be rest assured that the best path forward is going to be set forth by the federal courts, and what to do next if that is the avenue that does take place. But I do believe that is the best course of action, given this ruling.
It'll be interesting to see. It really will be. I mean, I think that this could, I feel like a lot of people are really waiting or cautious of the market really starting to hit the bed, or, just
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And generally, there is some kind of event that really triggers it, the downfall of everything. I mean, back in the housing crisis, it was just the banks starting to actually close and the house and houses being foreclosed on because people couldn't pay the mortgages. But that's a very different ballgame to what we have now. But what we see now is it's likely that with everything going on, we might see some funky business, to say it the best, between what's going on with the Trump and his economic policies and with the
Yeah.
AI bubble at the same time. And I do really want to see what happens. Like I'm a big person that really believes that the stock market is by no means nor shape indicative of the overall actual health of the economy.
No,
And I
I
think
hope
the
no
fact
one
that we're
thinks
seeing the
that,
stock
honestly.
market continue to go up while houses are getting more expensive, wages are being stagnated, prices of the overall CPI is going up, groceries are going up, everything's getting more expensive. And so you can't just say, like Pam Bondi said, oh, well, the Dow's over 50,000. That doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's
And I do want to see the market crash. not because I want to see the possibility of people losing their jobs and homes, because when the 2000.com bubble crashed, that wasn't really a case except for in the tech market. And what
Yeah.
happened in the 2000.com bubble was there was a ton of these companies propping themselves up saying and getting all this money for funding from investors, angel investors, VCs, and more, saying, well, hey, the internet's a real big thing. We can make a lot of money on it. Let's see what we can do here. And it ended up being that most of these companies weren't actually making money using the internet. So I feel like we're just in a situation where it's just I don't know. I'm trying to think of the exact term. There's like a saying that goes along with it. A lot of bad news is being built up, and a lot of less than desirable actions are occurring that could really just spell a damaging cycle to the U.S. economy and market. And I do think that Trump is playing a big part in it, and I'm excited to see what Congress does with this new ruling.
Yeah, so I mean, I expect them to definitely act quickly on it, and I expect Trump to be very aggressive with the GOP and MAGA members alike on it, just given that, it's been months since they could have made his decision on this, and who knows where we would have been, where we would be at now if they did make a decision earlier within the year or last year as well. But yes, the GOP is going to have to find a way to see if they're going to be able to get the votes even for this. As we know, individuals are retiring, special elections are coming up, and things of that nature. So it's
Yeah,
going to be really interesting to see, and time is ticking very fast for them.
and it still makes me laugh. Conservatives are supposed to be the free market party, less regulations, less government involvement, but here they are massively agreeing with these taxes with poor logic behind it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
100% a tax. Like no one that
it
can't
literally
be
is a tax.
argued, that can't be, relitigated. Like tariffs are a tax, and that tax has been felt by manufacturers and consumers. Me, myself, Muhammad, and everyone alike has felt the cost of these tariffs. So anyone that has ever stated before in the past that tariffs aren't a tax and tariffs aren't affecting American wallets, there are a lot of reports out there, bipartisan and nonpartisan, reports out there that states the very exact opposite of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a no brainer. I mean, even the Supreme Court in their ruling noted that tariffs are a tax. So it's not like this age old debate can finally wither out over whether or not that tariffs are a tax that American consumers do feel. And as we continue to watch the developments of the tariff decision and all of the implications coming from it, we will be sure to keep our ballot listeners up to date on what's going on. And then now I want to move to US Iran tensions as things continue to heat up. So, actually, real quick, I do
This
want
whole
to go.
Iran situation is just so ridiculous to
I
me.
actually forgot to mention. I do want to go back real quick because I forgot to mention that in the early in the morning when the decision was made and Trump was at that governor's meeting, that's when he got word of the decision. And apparently, like he was giving his speech, and I imagine someone walked up to him, said, X, Y, and Z, or he looked on his phone or something like that, and he just apparently started going off
I would
um,
love to
on
see
the
a video
justices.
or audio of that.
Apparently, he said "f these justices." No, he said these effing courts, and said he has to do something about it. But I did
Yeah.
just want to add that in there because I thought that was pretty funny, and I wish I was able to see that in the room. It's sad that they even had that arrangement because I know a lot of, I think like 8 governors or a few governors weren't able to, weren't invited to go. And I
From
know
what
the
I
Governors
understand,
Association
almost
did meet
every
there.
Democratic governor wasn't invited. But
Yeah, I think
that
it's
was
like,
like a month or two ago, and that was like through the Governors
yeah,
Association.
the Governors
So
Association decided not to like attach themselves to that event. It was mainly just basically like a Trump administration White House event, basically. But
yeah.
rounding back over to U.S. and Iran tensions, maybe he'll strike Iran because he's mad about not getting the ruling that he wanted on the tariffs. But escalating U.S. Iran relations tether on the edge of conflict as President Trump contemplates limited military strikes to compel Tehran toward a nuclear agreement, with adversaries discussing potential actions as soon as this weekend amid repositioned U.S. carriers and diplomatic pushes for concessions on Iran's nuclear activities. And actually, the UK had recently blocked the United States from I forget, it's the sand something, a certain set of islands from being used for the attack on Iran. Mohammed, I'm not sure if you're able to find that um, exact name of islands that the UK had blocked the United States from using. But the Iranian foreign minister has indicated a draft deal might be done very soon, potentially in the next 2 or 3 days. Yet Tehran warns that even symbolic U.S. attacks on sites could provoke a fierce retaliation, potentially inflicting 3,000 to 4,000 American casualties and sparking a broader regional war, including risks to oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz. So pre-negotiation overtures from Trump's intermediaries proposed controlled strikes followed by measured responses, but Iran has dismissed them as aggressive preludes, hiding preparations for possible U.S. military action. So this is all emphasizing that Iran responds only to a language of respect and not a language of threats and perceived actions. And critics ranging from Fox News commentators to congressional Democrats press Trump to strengthen his rationale before initiating another war, because that is the last thing that Americans truly want, is another war in the Middle East, especially a war with Iran that could be not just weeks, as the president is particularly saying that it could be, but it could last a few years or even decade, like unfortunately the Iraq War lasted.
And, and what I want to add as well, this has been actually a fairly new development, which is a big deal.
Yeah,
They Saudi Arabia and the UAE, surprised the UAE agreed to this because they're the devil's dogs, the leader is at least. They have said that they're not going to allow the United States or Israel to use its airspace to be able to attack Iran. And
yeah,
that means they're going to have to go through another roundabout way to get around them. And the most
yeah.
direct path to Iran is through Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Syria, or like a mixture of those two of those countries. So that means they're gonna have to go through some creative flight paths. If
And
they try to
where
go
was
above
that?
and around, they got to go through Turkey. If they try to go around the country, that's a lot of time spent just getting around instead of going straight through to Iran to be proper.
Buddy,
So
keep
so
going.
what I want to see really is how they're going to go about these strikes, how they're going to go about getting the land, the if they do decide to put ground troops there, how they're going to go about that. Because Iran's surrounded by directly Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan is not friendly with America in the militant sense because they've already partnered up with Saudi Arabia to form that essential NATO pact where it says if any one of our countries comes under attack, then it's just like if I came under attack. So if Pakistan gets attacked, Saudi Arabia is also behaving like it did, and vice versa. And now they've been looking at expanding that treaty amongst the Middle East between Muslim countries, which I'm glad about
Stop
because
arguing.
I got to say, it's been quite aggravating seeing the Middle East team up so much with the Western governments when the Western governments clearly don't care about the Middle East with anything except for Israel. And what I want to hear, let me actually double check this. Does Iraq allow U.S. to use its airspace? I think it may because they're in a basically like yeah, it's a complicated situation. Iraq really doesn't have too much of a power to stop it. But the U.S. does have a militant presence in Iraq. So what I think we're going to really see, and this is a little bit of optimism mixed with a little bit of where the tides have been turning. I think we're really going to start seeing these Muslim Middle Eastern countries actually start to work together to kind of push away from this American imperialism, because especially after the strikes in Qatar, or Qatar to be more proper, where
That's how
they
you
were
say
helping host the peace talks for Palestine and to be in Israel, where the Israeli government tried to murder a individual, some of the peace negotiators in Qatar, and the Qatar then said like, "This is insane. you guys are literally trying to kill our people while we are in our country, while we are helping you try to deal with this. And Saudi Arabia appropriately said there, like, at this point, we can't really rely on the United States to actually maintain peace. Like, we were told that the United States will help mitigate this and help, help us go through this peaceful process. But now here we have none of the U.S. did not work to stop these missiles being sent by Israel at
Yeah.
all. And how can we trust them at this point? And that was actually then that is really what sparked the catalyst for the Saudi Arabian government and Pakistani government to sign that trade deal, not that trade deal, the defense deal. And I hate when people say that Iran is a threat to America. It's not. It's not. If Iran
Threat
was
to
a threat
Israel.
to
That's who
America,
it's a
it'd have
threat
to be a
to.
threat to Israel first and foremost.
Yeah.
And if Iran can't wipe out Israel off the map, what makes you think it has even do anything to America, which is literally on the other side of the globe? I'm just
And
gonna say,
Israel won't move until we give a green light. And same thing, we won't usually move unless we get that green light or at least confirmation from Israel as well, which is damning and further shows the emphasis on the chokehold that Israel has on our not just domestic policy but foreign policy as well. And Congress is weighing a war powers resolution to constrain executive options with lawmakers like God bless his heart, Republican Thomas Massey and Democrat Ro Khan planning votes next week to block strikes without approval. The impasse underscores volatile stakes with ongoing live updates revealing Trump's acknowledgement of strike considerations and Iran's defensive posture, all aimed at stalled talks that could either avert or ignite confrontation. Trump has extended a 10 to 15-day deadline for Iran to reach a deal, warning of bad things otherwise, while U.S. military assets amass in the region, preparing for potentially weeks-long operation if diplomacy fails. Now, it's been reported that this amass of military fleets, troops, vehicles, things of that nature is almost just as big as in 2004 before we went into Iraq. So, I mean, 2001, I'm sorry. Before we went into, or was it 2004? I think I have one of those two years. I should not forget that, but I did. But regardless, it's just as big as when we went into Iraq. So people are speculating that yes, this may seem and may talk as it's like a week long endeavor, a weeks long endeavor, but this is very well something that could be months to a year or plus on end, leading to the end of Trump's presidency. And I
and
could
look,
surely see it going that way, and they're undermining the strength of Iran, which I feel like every American president should not do, underestimate their enemy in any capacity. But we will see what happens if diplomacy ultimately fails and if no deal is reached. Because I was reading that Khamenei and the Iranian regime have not agreed to currently the deal that's set place, and basically just said it's ridiculous and out of line. A lot of the concern, a lot of the demands that the Trump administration is wanting, and to think that we originally did have a deal with them that the
Obama
Obama
made
administration
Trump
put
revoked it.
together, and then Trump automatically revoked it. So
Yeah,
if that's if that was already there, then we would never have this issue.
yeah.
Literally.
And I mean, I think the big thing is really that Israel is going to accuse Iran, of always going for offensive nuclear weapons. I mean, we've heard the talk that for 25, 30 years now, they're always a few months away from having nukes. And then when they say, oh, well, you guys have been saying this for a while, why haven't they developed nukes yet? And it's like, oh, because we keep attacking them. And I'm like, no, you're just trying to destabilize the country and to make it not a threat for you so you can gain more control of the Middle East by weakening it. And I mean, that's what really Israel's game is by weakening the Middle Eastern neighbors, they're then able to expand their land more. And that's where the greater Israel picture comes into play, which they've been very
Yeah.
open about,
Great
including
Israel.
Netanyahu, including Ben Gvir, including more individuals within the Israeli government. And they even have patches on the IDF uniforms of greater Israel. And so it's clear that to reiterate, Greater Israel includes taking land from Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Literally taking land from three major countries two non-major but still pretty hefty in the grand scheme of things countries land so they can grow their own size more. And this also includes getting rid of the West Bank, which is Palestinian land without a doubt, even by the 1967 UN convention standards, which
Hmm.
I hate the UN. I think all that land's Palestinian land. But if we're going to be technically legal here by international standards, then yes, the West Bank is absolutely, without a doubt, Palestinian land. And we actually just saw Israel
I
pass a
think
law
we
saying that
might
they're
have lost. Oh, there we go.
no, I can still see you. I can still hear you. And
Okay,
we
yeah, I
just
think it was my
we just
connection.
saw Israel actually pass a law domestically saying that they're approving and allowing of through government funds and use to be able to expand settlements into the West Bank, which was what Saudi Arabia said would be a red line that if they crossed, they would be basically off the board with being on trying to be supportive of Israel. Now, whether or not they're going to actually back that up, we'll see. But we have seen Saudi Arabia say, you guys can't use our airspace anymore. And that's recent and that's a big deal. And so I what I find funniest most about this all though, even despite like the geopolitical changes and what's going on, is the fact that Trump started his whole run saying no new wars. We're gonna end the wars. Ukraine war hasn't ended. Palestine Israel hasn't ended. And now we're getting into a war with Iran, all for Israel.
Yeah, I think it was what,
And
no new wars, highest deportation of illegal immigrants, affordability like we've never seen it before. A lot of things that have not gone into place. There haven't been any major legislative achievements that have happened overall. And Muhammad, once we finish this, I was just like wanted to pop on X real quick and see what was like the commentary that's going on. And I'll let you finish your thought before I chime in with a few things.
yeah, feel free, feel free. I wanna hear what you got to say and
Oh,
what's going
so so Blitzer has reportedly sent a letter and an invoice, funny enough, demanding the return of 8.6 billion taken from Illinois families after the Supreme Court ruled the tariffs are illegal. And then also on the, I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the election, on the redistricting, as well as in our 2 episodes ago, kind of about the SAVE Act and um, voter fraud and some forth. Guess who's been accused of voter fraud in the good old state of Georgia?
Musk.
Elon Musk committed mass election fraud by sending out pre-filled ballot applications. So for everyone that's talking about it's the Democrats, it's the Democrats, it's the Democrats, most recent cases have been under Republicans who have voted for Trump.
Bro, it's
So
the
it's very
Israeli strategy.
interesting to
You
see.
commit the crime, then accuse the other side of committing it. You know what I mean?
Yes, another thing as well. I mean, it's not too politically important, but just because of me, because I live in New Jersey, New York is seemingly getting its first In and Out opening this year. So I am grateful for that as someone that lives in New Jersey and does frequent New York here and there with my
Have you ever had
girlfriend.
In
I'm
and Out?
definitely. I've never had In and Out. I've had basically all the major ones like your Smash Burger, Smash Bros,
The
Five
burgers are really
Guys.
good. The fries not too good in my opinion. They're
Really,
like they're
fries
not
not too
salted
good.
enough. They're a little bit too hard. The animal fries, it's like the crazy cheese fries. Those are pretty good. But the normal fries, honestly, if I could like rank In and Out's fries, they're probably near bottom of the list. But the burgers, damn good.
Interesting. And I
Yeah.
know we were kind of talking about like a lot of things that Trump was stating that a lot that have not come to fruition or even successes. But a few of these things, like just look at Dodge, was a flop. No tax on tips and overtime was pretty much a lie. As I'm hearing, it's actually the point 0.5 that you're
That
actually
doesn't
getting
get
taxed.
taxed.
That yeah, that's your no, that actually does get taxed. The point 0.5 is what gets taxed. And now, with this ruling, there's most likely going to be no 2000 tariff dividend checks, no U.S. Epstein arrest. Grocery prices have not come down. Obama's had more deportations with less drama. Russian Ukraine war is not over, and Drill Baby Drill is and has been a basic flop. So it's kind of like the only main thing that has been passed by this administration, most important thing, which was almost the same as last his first administration, was the tax cuts. Outside of the tax cuts, you really can't point to any concrete successful policy that he's done or that the administration has done. Yes, you have big beautiful bill, but that's the tax cuts. Everything that's come from that has not benefited Americans. Yes, you could say Venezuelan oil, but how has that benefited Americans when this whole new strike on Iran is now actually increasing gas prices across the nation? Like I've seen 2.99, almost $3. It's getting back to here in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Some do have 2.79, but it's not a frequent occurrence to see that throughout the state. So it's interesting to see that a lot. Not interesting to see. It's eye opening that a lot of these initiatives that Trump has beaded with his chest are falling flat on their face, and this is the most recent one coming from the Supreme Court, and we will see how this fallout with Iran continues, and if there is a deal, or if diplomacy just completely falls flat on its face, as we know that Donald Trump has not been the best at negotiations, as we've seen with the Ukraine war as well. And as always, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Behind the Ballot, where we keep politics engaged, balanced, and informative. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay involved. I'm Michaela Jenkins, and until next time, keep looking beyond the headlines and behind the ballot.
Thank you all for listening. God bless America. God bless you all. I hope you all have a